Hi everyone. Today I have Sasha Strauss from Innovation Protocol on the call. I actually listened to Sasha on an interview he did with Andrew Warner from Mixergy, where he was talking about branding and how branding can play into the higher purpose of your business. And I felt like no one has ever explained branding from that perspective before, and I said, let me get him on the show so he can talk to us about it. So, Sasha, go ahead, introduce yourself to my audience.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sasha. If you want technical details on me, you can check my profile out on LinkedIn, but I think we'll learn a lot today.
Definitely. So let's get started by saying, what exactly is a branding strategy?
The simplest way to describe it is that organizations are phenomenal at either manufacturing a product or providing a service, right? If you really think about everything that you are willing to pay for or desire, someone is really good at making that or providing you that service. And what brand strategy is it's the case that that relationship comes in, right? So as you're trying to buy the product, the way that it sounds, the look and the feel, and the vocabulary used to describe it, that's all the brand. The brand strategy is the process that we as brand builders go through to figure out exactly what story you should tell.
Okay, so you have the aspect of actually working and trying to figure out, okay, well, how will this story end up being like when you put the story out there, and that process itself is the strategy part of it.
Correct, exactly. And the brand is what the world tends to call the interaction between you and the product, right? So, like if everybody sort of paused for a second and thought to themselves, like, what was the last thing I paid $100 for?
Yeah.
And if you can figure out what that product is or what that service was, you can, I paid my attorney $1,000, right? Or $100, right? So you think to yourself, well, it's not just their resume, it's that they went to this school.
Okay.
Oh, wow, they're a Stanford alumni. Oh, that must mean that they meet these certain qualifications. Well, that's a brand. It's a promise. It's a story that is synonymous with that individual, their product, that service. And as we build brands for organizations, all we're thinking about is, what does the audience want to know? What promise does the audience want to hear from you? And we package it in a way that makes them feel very natural, as in, oh, of course I know why I want this. Of course this makes sense to me. Of course this is right for my need.
Definitely. So, I mean, how does brand strategy help the entrepreneur to determine the higher purpose of their, what their company is all about?
Well, good. The nature of an entrepreneur is we see that there's a problem, there's a need, and we kind of like figure out what would solve that need, right?
Yes.
Well, what we do in brand strategy is we not only address that need, but we say to ourselves, who else is trying to address that need, right?
Okay.
Who are your competition? And not only who are your competition, but once you come out with a message, what is the audience sitting around that need prepared to hear from you? And so all we're doing is we're kind of doing a business strategy, but from a communications standpoint.
Wow. So basically, how people would say they're doing strategy or business plan strategy, but now you're doing that whole process on how do you go out there and communicate what your brand is really about. Really being
That's all that it is, right? And and you're smiling because it sounds simple, but that's the reality of it. Is that we go to business school, we have all these manuals that tell you how to write a business plan, but when it comes down to it, no matter how well orchestrated, well constructed the business is, if you can't explain it to people, if you can't help them understand why they should want it, need it, desire it, then the business is just going to sit there by itself, right?
Definitely.
We think about all of the challenges that are going to confront the communication of your business to your audience and just make it easy. Just proactively figure out what story we should tell.
So during the process of figuring out what story you should tell, what's the first steps that an entrepreneur has to go through to craft that story that matches exactly what he wants to have come across to the audience?
Well, I'm happy to tell you that the problem is universal. It's not like, oh, entrepreneurs in tech have this problem, or CEOs of Fortune 500s have this problem. It's the same problem. And the challenge is that we all try to be everything to everyone. We try to say, I'm in the business of all of these things, right? And we as consumers don't like when someone is, quote, an expert at everything, right? Because that means that they must be compromising somewhere. I mean, I always use this analogy with my students, which is that Michael Jordan was phenomenal at basketball, putting the ball in, but baseball, being a husband, managing his finances, owning a team, right? He wasn't good at all of those things, even though they might have somewhat have been related.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. So what we often have to do is we have to as entrepreneurs, put out all of the things we want to accomplish and simplify it down to a single notion, a single value proposition, one reason to believe that you are the answer. Okay. And if you can't do that, your business isn't ready. Your business isn't ready to charge someone for the service or the product you provide.
But definitely, saying that you are the reason to believe that you're the option, but I'm sure every other entrepreneur out there is thinking that they themselves is they're the reasons for the solution to the problem. So, if everyone is thinking that way, I'm trying to figure out how can you take that, you understand the question I'm asking you, right?
I do. Yeah, and let me say that as I travel the world and I counsel, MBAs and entrepreneur programs, and I participate in organizations like Entrepreneurs Organization or YPO or any of these type come together to advise one another. The fascinating challenge is that everyone sort of runs up to me and says, I'm so excited about this business that I'm participating in. I've got this idea. It does this, it does this, it does this, it does this, and it's going to make me millions, right?
Yeah.
And I sort of pause them for a second. I turn to the person to my right. I bring them into the conversation. I say, I want you to tell this person in one sentence.
One sentence. Okay.
What your business is about. And the brilliant, sophisticated, accomplished, and educated entrepreneur sits back and says, I can't. I'm not ready yet. And that's all. And I would always say that if you wouldn't buy what you're selling, then it's not ready. And it's not that someone is going to audit the product and make sure that it has all the functional values that you described. They just got to understand what you're doing. They need to know why they should be listening. And that's what I'm asking your audience to do, is just stop telling me about all the features and all the functions and all about the price and all about the service, because those are things that I measure everything on.
Yeah.
Give me something unique. Give me some simple reason to believe so that when I hear your story, I can remember it, I can process its value, and I can internalize it. Now I'm ready for you to tell me about the price, the service you offer, the capabilities included, etc.
Definitely. So, just to make it more concrete for the audience to understand how you take that whole, the strategy, all the different things you brainstorm about the business, and now bring it down to one sentence that once you say it, it tells uniquely what your business is about. Give us an example of someone who you've worked with that had a company or a product that they had that probably was a little bit technical to explain, but you were able to get them to the point where in one sentence, it tells people what they do.
Well, so this is a fascinating story, I think. I used to work for a phenomenal global brand consulting firm called Siegel & Gale. Okay. There's probably about 5 brand consulting firms internationally that have prestige, that well-regarded, etc. And when I was working at Siegel & Gale, one of my programs to lead was on Adobe. So Adobe is second largest manufacturer of desktop software in the world. And not only that, but many people's careers are enabled by Adobe technologies, right? Like graphic designers, photographers, all of these really capable creative individuals. Well, we sort of went through an analysis and we recognized that Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, all these amazing tools in a vacuum were highly desirable. But because of the way that they were communicated and defined by the engineers who built them, you might have Photoshop 9 running adjacent to Illustrator 11, which you bought in 2002, right? And all of these incongruous sort of relationships between the technologies, it was confusing to the creative individual and the partners, like the printers. So the creative individual would produce something using Photoshop 6, and they would have to call the printer and say, do you have this technology? Can you read this file format? And it basically became a distraction. It was a slow-moving process because Adobe engineers were building, creatives were trying to buy and use, and they were trying to create files that some other individual would be able to interpret. Yeah. So we kind of like put a pause on everything, and we said, wait a minute, what are all of these tools together considered? Well, they're a suite of products. They're a collection of integrated devices where files can be moved between Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and all the other products seamlessly. So let's stop talking about them as insulated individuals. Let's talk about them as a suite of interactive tools, and not only a suite of interactive tools, but that are synchronized in their release timing. So we actually put a pause on all the numbers, and we came out with, well, let's actually come out with a sequence. We're starting all over again. These are a suite of products specifically for creative individuals, Creative Suite. And this is Creative Suite 1, CS1, CS2. I think we're at CS5 now. Yeah. But what it did is it reset all the systems. It stopped all the complicated vocabulary and said, you want to edit photos, you want to produce publications and products like that, you want to send them to the printer. All of these building blocks work well together. Yeah. Creative Suite.
So basically brought down the essence of what they do a bunch of different things, but basically making it such that, okay, this is what this specific tool within this suite does. Tells you exactly what it does. This is what this other one does, and it tells you specifically. I like that.
So yeah, exactly. And you probably all remember that there was new icons to make it easy for people to figure out what Adobe tool that they were using. Yeah. Now, I'm not taking credit for the entire revamping of the institution, but it just took a common sort of realization, which was we make tools that help creative people get their jobs done, whether they're designing or producing. Well, instead of making it complicated for them to get their jobs done, ourselves, as far away as possible and think about our value that we're creating. These are a suite of integrated tools that enable a creative to do their job and sell their services. Let's stop fighting about it. Let's call it the Creative Suite and create marketing vocabulary around it so everybody understands how these tools work together.
Definitely. And earlier on you were saying how when they start the process of brand strategy, they have to think about who else in the space that's doing the same thing. Their clients, and I want you to give us more information as to. I think you said something about it being stakeholders. Finding out how does someone find out the stakeholders in the entire process?
So I call them stakeholders. Some people might say, well, why can't you just be more specific and like employees and things like that? I call them stakeholders because I think that they're anyone who has a stake in the answer, meaning that it's going to affect them somehow. An employee, and it's going to change the way that they communicate, whether they're a recruiter, and it's going to change the way that they recruit, a customer, change the way that they buy. I call them stakeholders. And so every time I am challenged with creating a brand strategy, I always identify 100% of the stakeholders, meaning every single audience that is going to be affected by the work that I produce. And I know that sounds downright simple, but it's an amazing challenge that most people do not take on. Because when I identify an audience, not only do I note that stakeholder, but I figure out exactly influencing them. What are they reading? Who do they trust? What brands do they know? What have those brands said to that individual that would create that level of trust? So that when I go out and construct my answer specifically for my clients, I'm not guessing at anything. I'm like, you've got 9 stakeholders, 4 of which are influenced by this single communication channel. You need to refine your message within that single communication channel so those 4 stakeholders can influence the other 9, right? Just a backwards path. And because I break it down to such a simple process, it's not arbitrary. It's not like Don Draper, Mad Men, Hocus Pocus. That's a very those are the people that will be paying for these goods. Those are the points of influence that I have to consider. Great. We know that our competition is doing X and Y and Z, so therefore we're going to do A, B, and C. It's like a complicated equation in the communication strategy sector. That's all that it is.
Okay, so you have the different stakeholders now. You figured who they are, and you say something about creating the message that's specific to each of them. I'm getting that correctly, right? So I guess at one point you're going to have different people within the whole stakeholder, all the different stakeholders that you have, and you explaining what your process, your business is to them. I'm sure there's going to be a point where the way you communicate to one of them is going to be different from the way you communicate to the other in basically getting out the information about the brand. Is that the case?
That is the case. Now, I have to say that you got to think about it like a pyramid. So everyone sort of follow me here, is that the tip of the pyramid, at the very top, is the same message. It's a core who we are, why we matter, okay? And it's the same for all of your audiences, okay? Then a tier down, you might have a little broader message, which, like, I'll tell you what those things are called. So the tip of the pyramid is like a tagline, a brief summary of what we do. Directly below that, you might have a mission statement, and a mission statement is functionally how we run our business. We are a manufacturer of X type of product, and we distribute them into these sectors. Okay? Then you move down a little further, and you have what we call the positioning statement. So we're third tier down in the triangle. The positioning statement is what position in the market is exclusively ours to claim. Meaning, I've told you what our tagline is, I've told you what mission we're out to accomplish, but what place in the grand scheme of this sector is ours? And if you can come up with vocabulary to describe that, you have what we call a positioning statement. Now, as you move down the triangle, everybody, you can imagine that you've got different audiences. Well, what you do is you just slice up the triangle. So, okay, this part of it is specifically for this demographic. What words do they like better? What phrases could we use that most make sense to them? And, the triangle that I'm describing is the end state. Let's talk about the construction state. So what I would do, and I like to do this because it really helps people visualize what they're trying to accomplish, I build little caricatures of every single audience, every single stakeholder.
Okay.
I know this sounds like a game to all of you, but trust me that it works. Get a whole bunch of magazines together. I don't care if it's Us Weekly or Discover Magazine, doesn't matter. And I want you to cut out arms and legs and outfits and hats and toys and products for every single audience, and I want you to make a little collage. Make the collage, and then I want you to describe what those people want to hear from you. Write the sentences, like say, Audience X loves this, hates this, thinks of competition as blah, blah, blah. Will like my product because, right? And you just go through this super in-depth deduction of every one of their needs. Once you go through it for the entire sector, because you know your competition well, you are not going to say anything to those people that your competition is saying. So now you have all of these words, right? Remember, everybody, we made the caricature and we've listed all of this information. I want you to just get out a red pen and I want you to circle the common themes. Like, whoa, you know what? 8 out of 9 of these guys totally get this single notion. Okay? Put it aside. That's super important. Maybe that's going to manifest itself in our positioning statement.
Okay.
Right? And as you've gone through this process, you've just collected as much information as you can and almost used a fine-tooth comb to winnow it down to just the most important messages. Those fill out the top of the pyramid. Then as you start to say to yourself, okay, now that I have the big idea that's relevant to all of them, now let me just talk about audience X and their specific need. And that's when you can create messages that are so specific, so tapered to just what it is that they want to hear from you.
Okay, so you take out the information to the one, you line out everybody and say, okay, this is what each of them needs to hear. And then you look at it and say, okay, which of these statements from everybody is similar? And then you take out those similar statements and put to the side, because that's going to be part of the positioning statement. And then you also have the one that each audience or each stakeholder has something specific that they want to hear about. And those ones, I guess maybe when you start engaging with them, you start with those specific statements that they want to hear. Right?
Well, it depends on how well they know you yet. If this is like a cold call, like Introduction 1, you're at a networking event, you shake hands, you hand the business card, you always start at the tip of the pyramid. You always tell people who you are and why you matter first, who your business is and why it matters first. And they say, wow, that's interesting, tell me more. Then you say to them, well, tell me what business you're in. They tell you what business they're in, and then you go to the slice of the pyramid that is perfectly aligned with their need, right? Because that way they don't disappear and stop paying attention. You're like, okay, I told them that this is who I am, and this is why I matter, this is what our business accomplishes. They said, that's interesting. You give them the chance to talk. I'm in this category, this is what I love to do, and you say, it's interesting that you say that because our business actually has a specialization. And then you just douse them with the vocabulary that you've already thought about in advance. And they sit there and say to themselves, like, I'm so glad we met. because you clearly understand my problem. You speak my language. You don't sound like all those other guys. Wow. When can we meet?
Definitely. So basically, the common points that you picked out from all the stakeholders is basically kind of the conversation starter, the thing that gets the conversation started, and then the difference that you picked out of from the from each of the stakeholders is what even solidifies the engagement.
Correct. Wow. And you're articulating it well, and you sound very comfortable with it because it's kind of simple, right? It's kind of naturally deductive. It's like, okay, if I started from ground zero, I wouldn't guess. I would kind of do a little bit of research. I'd kind of ask myself a couple questions. Well, the challenge has been is that we have been taught since youth, if you're doing something business-wise, think about the operations first. And my conclusion has been after 16 years, you know, we kind of got the operation down. Like, there's a lot of books and a lot of classes. Like, everybody needs to just hold up for a second.
Yeah.
Assume the operation is running like it should. What do you want people to remember about your business, and how are you going to communicate that idea to them? There's a process to get there as well. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. I mean, that's why I had to get you on the show, because you breaking it down like this really makes me understand that branding is not just what everybody's talking about. There is some additional things to branding that you have to actually do. And
right. I think the challenge is, Owen, that we hear brand and we think logo. You know, we hear brand, right? And we think graphic design. And like everybody who's listening, think about this. Have you ever, since the day you made your first dollar, have you ever purchased anything because you thought the logo was pretty?
No.
Right? I mean, you're like looking at me, you're like, maybe. No, you don't. You don't buy anything because the logo was pretty. And next, have you ever purchased anything because the name was so fascinating and emotionally intriguing to you? No. Nike is not an emotionally intriguing name. Google's not an emotionally intriguing name. BMW, Bavarian Motor Works in German, none of those things ever mattered to you. So everyone needs to pause for a second and recognize that your name and your logo are not going to be the reason that people buy your products and services. What those names and logos represent, the promise you make to the world, who you are and what value you create and how they understand it, that's what they want to buy. So think about that first and then worry about your logo or your name.
Yeah, I like that point of, breaking down what you say to each stakeholder. Is there, to make it even more concrete, is there like a specific person you're willing to talk about that you were able to take, all their stakeholders and break it down to, each person and how they should, when they're talking to each stakeholder, how they should explain what the company is about to them?
Okay. So we have a client in the biomedical devices category. We can talk about it. The company is called Bioness. Very smart, capable, engineering as a natural part of their culture. I mean, they really know exactly what they're doing, and they specifically target neurostimulation devices. They're kind of like if you've lost the ability to translate a signal from your brain to your arm that says, reach out and grab this. They have exoskeletal or implantable devices that can almost like teach your arm or enable your arm to go out and grab that thing. It's just So, we were engaged with them and we were working through how better to communicate their business. And I was spending time at one of their, what do you call it, a patient, an individual who was using their device's house.
Yeah.
And this was an amazing man. I mean, this is an entirely true story. Really smart business person, worked for global corporations, drove a Porsche, played golf with his business partners, great kids, great wife, like American recipe for just what we all strive to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm in his house and I'm talking to him about the technical capabilities of the device. It's on his arm and he's using it and I'm asking him about it. And I'm like trying to extract from him the medical or therapeutic values because that's what we thought was necessary. And, he got up in the middle of the conversation, by the way, just right in the middle of the conversation, and it's going to be hard for me to show you, but he gets up, and remember, he sort of had paralysis, so he doesn't walk perfectly, and his hand is not, it's kind of like this, and he gets up in the middle of our conversation, and he walks across the room, okay, devices that Bioness provided, he would not have been able to just effortlessly walk across the room. But because it's helped his it's enabled cortical retraining, he could actually like lift his leg as he thought was necessary, okay? So he walks across the room, and he reaches out with his hand. You know, his hand was tucked against his chest, and it used to be locked like this, but now he can actually move it away, you know? Reaches out, grabs a toy off the floor, goes over and puts it in a basket, his little daughter's basket of toys, and comes back to me and he says, a year ago, I couldn't even have gotten up. Not only could I not have gotten up, I couldn't have walked across the room, grabbed my daughter's toy off the floor, and put it in that basket. This is not about therapeutic, you know, physical rehabilitation. This is about me carrying on with my life.
Yes.
Right? That's it. In the simplest, back away from the technology and the medical revelations and the science, this is about a man living his life on his terms, carrying on with his life. So we reached out and grabbed that concept and we packaged a phrase, live on, L-I-V-E, capital O-N, live on. That's what this is about. These electronic devices that are on are enabling you to live on, carry forth, do as you always wanted to do. And that simple concept has manifested itself in every single facet of the way that that business operates.
So basically, you were able to find out one sentence that really explains what, you know, what is the solution that the company is providing, really.
It wasn't even a sentence. It was two English words smashed together. And not only did we do that, but we tested it in like 6 or 8 markets globally. We actually created a local, you know, linguistic variation of that concept, and it worked all of those places as well. All of the patients, all of the therapists, all the physicians were like, yeah, you know, this is about people living life on their terms. This is about living on. Bioness, live on. I get it.
I like that.
Isn't that cool?
It just gets straight to the point. And when you were able to find this out for the client, I want to figure out, how do you now take that to them and have them incorporate, you know, this, what you just found out in their business?
So I have a policy, and it's a major part of the way that our firm operates. You know, all 20 of my staff know that you present no answer in a vacuum. Meaning, like, you know, for example, let's just pretend that we're doing a logo.
Okay.
Hypothetically, and you know, after a long deductive process, we've created the vocabulary in which the organization, you know, communicates and build them stories, all that sort of process, and then we're going to present them the logo. We never just show them a piece of art. Okay. We actually stop and think to ourselves, okay, well, where's the art going to show up? So we show them their package or their sign.
Okay.
Then we show them the audience. Then we show them the competition. The competition's logos. And then, maybe only at that point, do we show them some core ingredients like this color, this shape, and this word. We take that whole recipe and then present them the logo. Do you see how it's not, look at this piece of art, do you like it? It's, okay, this isn't going to just show up in a vacuum. It's going to be a part of a consumer's lifestyle. It's going to be next to competition. It's going to be on this package. It's going to incorporate these colors and shapes. Now let's look at the logo. Now let's think about whether it works for us. And you see how we're presenting it in context rather than in a vacuum?
Definitely.
So organization-wide, all of my employees, every grad student I've ever had in 4 years, I explain to them, don't show me the answer. Show me the story that will lead me to the answer, so that when I hear the answer, it almost feels natural. And that's it. So my answer to your question, Owen, is if you are going to go through this process, you are going to produce the answer, don't hand it to anybody. Don't shove it into the face of your sales team and say, go use this. They deserve to be walked through the process, to understand how you got there, and for them to be exposed to the answer in context. That's it.
So that's kind of like showing them, okay, how you got there, but also showing them, is it like you're doing kind of like an analysis saying, this is the results I gained by doing it this way? You know, like how you have a website design and you're trying to, you know, do user testing, kind of. This is a whole different field now. You're trying to do user testing to see how do people relate to certain elements you put on the website, right?
Yes, yes.
So is that like applying that whole process to branding itself now?
Yeah. In fact, I would, even when we're doing usability testing for web designs that we execute, we still don't just sit a consumer in front of a computer and put up a website and say, do you like this? Okay. We get them into the frame of mind where they would even want to use that website. So we kind of give them a task, like, let's pretend it's a shopping site, okay? So we give them an assignment. They don't know why they're there. We give them an assignment, which is you have $100. Your neighbor's daughter is having a birthday party, and you want the perfect gift. What would you do to find the perfect gift? And they're like, well, I'd probably just type it into Google, and we would let them do that. Yeah. And then eventually, after they've navigated their natural course, then we say, okay, great. Well, now that you've done this, sounds like you're going to end up at a store's website, and you want to buy directly from that store. And they're like, yeah, that's exactly what I've done here. Good. Well, here are 3 stores we'd like you to just don't buy anything. Just look at it and interact with it and tell me what feels right. They don't know which one we prefer, which one we've built. Yeah. But by them, again, interacting in context, it's not this sort of, do you like this website? Because personally, I don't know if I like Facebook's experience, but I love using it. I love participating in it. Yeah. It's psychologically relevant to me. And until we get the world of brand builders and the world of entrepreneurs to stop trying to throw something in someone's face and say, do you like this? But put them in a contextual environment so that they are consuming it in the situation and the mental state that they normally would, we're not going to get the right answer. We're never going to produce the answer that's right for them. And so my operational policy, my teaching policy, my educational policy has always been, go through the due diligence to produce the right answer. And when you produce what you believe to be the right answer, do not throw it into the face of the audience. Walk them through the natural course of action that they would go through to land there. Definitely. And only then do you have the right to extract their opinion.
Wow. That's why I had to get you on the show, because you know how to put this in the right frame of mind for people to understand why they need to go through this process. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And I know you've actually worked with a lot of entrepreneurs in the whole process of branding. Is there something that is similar with all of them in the whole process of trying to figure out what is the higher purpose of their business as it relates to branding that you think you can share with the audience?
Well, again, I have a policy which is that all brands are not alike. Okay. Even if they're in the same business targeting the same consumer, there is an independent reason to believe. And I also do believe that every organization, every individual has a unique, compelling, impassioned purpose that we all can believe in. So, you know, that's my first response to your question. But I will tell you that there is a common problem. The most common problem that I have had is that the chief executive officer, chief sales officer, chief operating officer is in an office. Oh. They're not on the street. They're not interacting with consumers. They're not reading the publications that their audience would, you know, incorporate into their life or decision-making process. Yeah. They are in an office producing reports and bossing people around. They're not the ones who should be defining the organizational voice. They're just not. They should participate and contribute, but what happens most of the time is that organizations large and small say, oh, chief person? They know this business better than everybody. They should decide what our message is. And that's just not the case. They're brilliant, capable leaders. They're not so in tune with the culture of the consumer that they know exactly what interests them in the ebbs and flows of the psyche. No. Your salesperson totally knows. Your salesperson is on the phone, on email, on the street every day, beating down doors, theoretically. They know what works. They know what doesn't work. They know what competitor's message is working, distracting, incorporating, considering, right? Yeah. So, C-suite executive, I respect your feedback and I want it. It's a part of the system. but you're not the answer creator. You're a participant. The answer creator is only an independent person like myself or someone like me collecting, aggregating, objectively looking at all of the feedback and saying, interestingly enough, this point keeps showing up in every one of the situations I observed.
Okay.
And not only that, but your salesperson in this market, this market, this market, and this market all brought it up on their own will.
Yeah.
I have to say that I think that's probably where the answer lies.
Definitely. I like how you go directly to the people who are in touch with the consumer, which is the sales, the sales team. But in the case where you have a small business where it's just the entrepreneur himself, who has the mindset of being the guy who's in front of people trying to sell the business, and also has has to manage the business. So there might be some conflict if you're trying to talk to that person to work out the brand strategy for that person, because they're doing all the different they're responsible for all the different roles. I'm trying to figure out.
No,
go ahead.
Well, I agree where you're coming from, and I want everyone to know that Innovation Protocol as an institution, as a well-regarded brand development consulting firm, was founded with no partners, no help, no financing. We decided what our reason to believe was. We propagated that message to an audience who was prepared to listen, and we've only grown through our own business development scheme. Okay, so I want to be clear that this is an authentic reflection of what I believe is right. And the answer to your question is that if that entrepreneur is doing everything, that means that they're compromising 100% of their business. Because, I think that I'm a physically strong, mentally aware, capable communicator. I am terrible at doing my laundry. I mean, no, I should not be doing my laundry. And so when it comes to my dress shirts, I pay a specialist to do my dress shirts. And all of us in business think that's fairly reasonable, right? Of course we don't do our own dress shirts. But you know what, Owen? You probably should not be doing your bookkeeping.
Yeah, definitely not.
Right? You're not good at it.
No.
So stop thinking that you can be all things to all people and run all of these cycles and be a good partner and a good family man and a good laundry doer. No.
Yeah.
My answer is, if you are the senior executive, the business owner, that entrepreneur, that CEO, and you want to focus on the brand strategy, you better be the one selling the business. But if you're also managing the books, negotiating contracts, writing your legal documentation, you ever seen anybody who's great at 10 things?
No.
Michael Jordan wasn't great at 10 things. Michael Jordan was good at one thing, and he made $1 billion global business out of doing one thing well and giving people access to it. We all wanted to be like Mike. Remember that? He gave us access to the one thing he did well, and he found people to take care of the other 9. You as an entrepreneur, you as a senior executive, cannot possibly be phenomenal at everything. Decide what you're terrible at and find people to serve those needs. That's my answer.
I definitely get that point. That's a good point. But I was thinking of, in a situation where the person, eventually they will work their self and their business to that point where they can start delegating and getting the right people on, onto the team. But in the beginning where it's just starting out and they have this whole brand strategy in mind, but they're starting out from the beginning. I just want to get something that you would tell that person. I know that they should get somebody as they grow to help them with the specialization. Yeah. But as they're starting out in the beginning and probably don't have all the ability to get those additional people, the resources, how would they approach brand strategy at that point?
I see. And I'm sorry. Okay, so more specifically to your question, my answer most often is that right now, the need that you are trying to address, the problem that you're trying to solve, is already being solved in some manner or another, right?
Yeah.
Some organization is apparently kind of taking care of that issue, right? So think about the earliest days of like Travelocity or Yahoo Travel, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that was an innovative, completely new solution, digital interaction with booking. Oh my God, amazing, right?
Yeah.
But there were travel agents. So that entrepreneur's job is, I need to know what is currently serving the need, And only once I understand and have mastered what is currently serving the need do I have the power to come up with a message that depositions, that pushes that answer out of the
Oh, I get what you're saying.
equation. Summary.
So
Okay, go ahead.
Hi everyone, we're back. We got disconnected, but the question was to that entrepreneur who's starting out, doesn't at this point have the ability to hire, the right specialist to help them with the brand strategy, but they know that they want to start with, getting their story right from the beginning. What would that person do?
Cool. So my answer is that, even if you believe that you're doing something groundbreaking, truly innovative, you have to recognize that your audience is currently being served in some manner. They're actually not in desperate need of what you're providing because they don't know what you are going to produce, right? So let me use a tangible example for you. So what I was sort of mentioning earlier, which is that if you look at something like Yahoo Travel or Travelocity, these portals where you can do travel planning and book tickets. We all probably remember 15 years ago, we had to go to a travel agent, and it was a miserable experience. You're on the phone with the airlines doing everything that you could. So when that innovator came up with a platform for booking online travel for the consumer, the question that entrepreneur owes themselves to ask is, okay, I know that I have this revolutionary new answer, but my customer's need is currently being served. What is serving their need? And how can I deposition? How can I come up with a value proposition that makes that old answer no longer relevant? Only once you've thought about the need as it is currently being met can you produce the new answer, the new value proposition, a brand strategy that uniquely defines your contribution. Until you have done that, until you have defined what the current need is and how that current need is being met, you cannot step forward. You cannot stand up and say, this is who I am, this is why I matter, and this is why you should believe.
I totally like that. I like that answer. So basically, you're taking the example that's already out there and trying to find a way to, shape the example that's already out there and find how they can put it such that it suits them specifically. At the same time, it's totally new to the customer. I like that.
Right. Cool.
I definitely enjoy you being on the show. So tell the audience, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, the simplest answer is that if you want to just hear my thoughts about nonsense, how I react to brands or people, I'm fairly active on Twitter. So pretty easy to find, twitter.com/Sasha Strauss. Now, if we've done business together, I'm happy to partner with you on LinkedIn. And if we're friends in real life, I'm happy to connect with you on Facebook. But I respond to Twitter direct messages all the time. So if you do have a question and you want to have a conversation, that's best. That's the simplest, easiest way to get a hold of me.
Thank you very much, Sasha, for coming on the interview. I really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure, Owen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed today's interview. And before you go, I want you to do me a favor. I'm trying to build my community of entrepreneurs who find my content useful on Facebook so we can engage, have discussions live right there on Facebook. And to get to my page on Facebook, you go to www.facebook.com/HYVASSISTANT. And again, it's www.com. What am I saying? No, it's www.facebook.com/HYVASSISTANT. And when you get there, what you're going to do is look for a button that says like, and you click on that button, and then basically you become a fan of the page. It's that simple. You don't even have to leave me your email. Just click on the button that says like. And again, the page to go to is www.facebook.com/HYVASSISTANT. And that stands for HYVAssistant. Real easy. I look forward to seeing you on Facebook. Have a great day.